We have reached the bewitching point of the final presentation. We have another multi-state, not from the state of Utah, I gather, but another multi-state proposal. The Multi-State Clean Diesel Initiative with Bill Becker and Nancy Seidman. Thank you.
$35,000, and with a lot of elbow grease, they helped us to make the air cleaner. Through this multi-state initiative, 14 states from across the country pulled together to enact a tougher diesel truck requirement than the federal government's. Together, these 14 states represent 42% of national diesel engine sales, a level we believe is a critical mass that will compel a de facto national standard benefiting every area of the country. The reduction in air pollution will be huge, equivalent to removing 30 million cars from the roads nationwide, and will translate into substantial public health and environmental benefits. And this is only the beginning. With the success of this collaborative effort, we have added another tool to our toolbox. Through STAPA-ALAPCO, we are seeking other opportunities for multi-state efforts as we continue to work toward our goal of providing clean air for all of us. And about that Lorax, at the end of his story, Dr. Seuss leaves us with this. Catch, calls the onceler, he lets something fall. It's a truffleous day, come back. Thank you.
Carl.
Well, first, as a breather, I just want to applaud and thank you for the incredible work that you've done, and which is truly awesome. But let me ask, though, I mean, as you pointed out in your presentation, you really were dealing with a peculiar quirk in federal law and a 2-year window of 2005, 2006. And given that, what is the real potential of replicating what you did in any way in other areas?
Yeah. Well, a couple of points. One is we have established a template, and we've actually established a comfort level amongst states from, as I mentioned, diverse perspectives and diverse ideological interests to take on additional projects. My annual meeting is taking place this week in Baltimore, and my board of directors, as recently as last evening, asked that we initiate a school bus retrofit program throughout the country. And while EPA is pushing this, they need a large boost from states. We are also looking at using the same template to regulate power plants that have escaped regulation in the past. And the states have worked together, this same template of sharing information, from providing technical assistance, from helping to respond to industry opposition. Sharing interests among state and localities is just enormously important.
Yeah, Carl, please follow up.
A quick. I obviously understand that and the importance of your organizations as, in a sense, a lobbying force here, but in this particular instance, we had an opportunity to create a de facto national standard because of this quirk in the law. And that opportunity, that sort of unique opportunity, doesn't really seem to exist elsewhere. Everything else you have to do is really sort of traditional lobbying to get either national law changed or a lot more than 14 states to sign on.
Well, there are several potential companies that clearly operate along between states throughout the nation, and much prefer common permitting processes or common review processes or common technology requirements, and don't want to have a 50-headed hydra of requirements. So the states see the benefit, and the industry will see the benefit of these states working together on this.
There are many areas in air pollution. Consumer products is one, and sometimes utility regulations or industry regulations where the states are willing to go further than the federal government is either able to or willing to go, and that is where we believe this effort can be replicated.
David, Carl, did you have another question? Yeah, David Osborne, and then Susan Schwab and Bill Klinger.
I actually have two questions. In your application, you said that this represents the first ever national collaborative state regulatory effort related to air quality. Have there been any others related to other forms of environmental pollution?
Not that we know of.
Okay. And then the second is the manufacturers of these diesel engines who had to change their engines for the year 2004 argued apparently that they would never go back to the old engine in 2005 and 2006, even though it might sell better, because they'd already changed their plants, changed their engines. Did you believe their argument? I would assume you didn't, and if not, why?
Well, these are the same engine manufacturers who installed illegal defeat devices on their engines for a decade, and resulting in millions of tons of excess emissions, and who settled, as you've read, with the Justice Department and signed a consent decree, and then 2 months after they signed the consent decree, they tried to change the consent decree. And so, without sounding too harsh, there was a
it's okay.
There was a pattern. There was a pattern of recalcitrance, and so when they said to us, we will meet the new requirements, we said, then you shouldn't worry what we're doing, because this is merely an insurance policy in case you don't.
Susan.
Two questions. One, potential applicability of this approach to, say, CAFE standards. And second, tell me what kind of legal challenges you've faced along the way in this process.
Well, I think the most exciting part of this is applicability, and I hope that our auditor made this very clear in the application, and if she didn't, I'd like to kind of reinforce it and maybe get back to your question. We see such a potential for the states and localities. I represent 2 national associations. They're separate. They're independent groups to work together, and they're excited about this project. They are the Lorex. They have passion, and they're looking for other ways of regulating in a fair way, but in a national way, pollution that is becoming very difficult given the resources and given politics and given a number of other problems. And so they're looking at buses, they're looking at fuels, they're looking at power plants, and we have as I said, we have the template, we have the comfort level of states like California and North Carolina and Georgia and
Maine.
And Maryland and Massachusetts and others working together, feeling good, sharing information. And the second point
was the legal challenges.
Yes.
We did not, to my knowledge, none of the states faced challenges after the rules were adopted. I know when we went to hearing, and I believe all the states who participated did, there were challenges from the trucking associations. And in a number of states, particularly the early ones, they were successful in derailing the regulation, which is why there were not some additional states involved. But one of the great benefits of doing this project together was that as subsequent states went through hearings, we continued to see the same letters, the same types of lobbying from people, and we were able to then take advantage of what the earlier states had gone through and use the information to rebut their arguments and to get the regulations completed.
We had bi-weekly conference calls where we shared this information and strategized.
Bill Klinger and then Kathleen.
There may not have been consortiums in the environmental area, but there have been statewide consortiums for a variety of reasons. This is a broader, I think, consortium than has existed perhaps in the past. Most of the others have been northeastern states for one reason or another. I gather that you really have 2 targets here. One, for example, on Earth Day, the EPA issued new regulations for emissions
the non-road diesel
for non-road, which may have been. Would you take credit for that? The fact that they're
well,
in part.
We worked. This was a success story by EPA, and while we've been critical in many areas, I think they deserve a tremendous amount of credit for what they did. We think it could be improved a bit, but we worked very, very cooperatively with them, building upon successes that occurred in the past on this issue.
But I gather your real sort of target was to create a critical mass which said to the manufacturers, it is not going to be worth your while to continue making these machines because you're not going to be able to drive them.
Well, or that it's not worth making two because you'll only be able to sell them in half the country, and it's
Right, and the rest
not
of
good
the-
use of your resources to continue to make two kinds of engines for 2 years.
So that is really kind of the innovation. I mean, that you create this critical mass. I mean, it's not the consortium necessarily. It's the
Well, it's the critical
targeting.
mass. I think it's also showing ourselves that we're able to do this kind of thing and to take a serious environmental problem, a serious emissions of nitrogen oxides, take on a major industry, take on a problem that the public recognizes. I think they're ahead of us sometimes in terms of recognizing the problems with particle pollution and big engines, and show that we can do something to improve how everybody breathes.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I thought traditionally that you should have been able to do this through a Congress, right? In other words, if they had acted
If Congress had given EPA authority or
to do
required
this
them to
in
do
the
these
first
standards
place, this wouldn't
earlier.
have been necessary. So this is really the states acting when Congress hasn't. And you're just curious, in fact, in one way, this is government not doing its job. It's the states stepping up to the plate when the federal government hasn't.
And I guess there seems to be a common concern here that's being expressed, and I just
No, I'm happy that you were able to do it,
Right.
but on the other hand, it's kind of interesting that you had to do it in this roundabout way rather than the direct way.
and that's kind of another innovation here that EPA, doesn't matter the administration, is oftentimes unable or unwilling to act. And here is an example, we think innovative, where states are sending a signal
It is
that we are willing to step in and do the right thing and protect public health. And this is not one state, this is 14 states, and the innovation is, it's a first time ever for trucks, it's a first time ever for this diverse group, it's a template for the future, and we're planning on building upon this because we see a tremendous opportunity.
Can I ask, Nancy, you're a public employee in the
Correct.
Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Bill,
Yes.
are you a public employee or are you employed by the states?
I am employed by
Well, your board of directors.
this, I'm funded by state and by government money. I'm the executive director of this organization, which is funded by federal, state, and local funds.
But Bill is hired by a board of directors, which I serve on, that is comprised of all public officials.
Right, so you're not a public employee, you're a member, you're employed by the association
Correct.
then.
I set up the association 20
Right,
some years ago.
and so to go back to Bill Klinger's point, just so we can clarify this in our own minds about the innovation here, the significance is clear. There have been other forms of cooperation among the states, the state attorney generals or attorneys general coming together on the tobacco issue, which is a form of collaboration of this sort. But the innovation here is two parts. One, this is in the environmental field, and secondly, it's a political innovation. You've gone beyond the northeastern states and gone beyond California. You've really drawn in other states which are not traditionally part of a coalition of this sort.
And yeah, correct, and this is applicable. It's not just one region. Because of this victory, because of this success story, we're going to be using this. We'd like to use it in other opportunities.
And do you see, I'm told by others that increasingly this is a form of getting national laws passed to go into the states and get a half dozen or a dozen states to do it, and then to get it done at the national level.
Yeah, and in fairness to the Congress and to the federal government, I think we would have preferred, getting back to your question on Ms. Townsend, we would have preferred to have the Congress or EPA in one fell swoop do it right and make the action. But we wouldn't accept it not happening when we thought it was so ludicrous that there was this gap. And so yes, it's another way of sending a signal that if it's not done right the first time, the states are able and willing, no matter what the budgets are, to step in and do the job.
And you're mobilizing NGOs and others on
yes, we
behalf.
have.
This is a political effort. This is.
Well, we're not being political here, but we are being strategic in garnering support for doing what we think is the right thing.
Politics is okay.
Sounds, I don't know if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck.
You know,
Ed Dorn.
many of our biggest proponents have been, from from both parties, and this has been totally apolitical.
Just a final comment, David. I, as you know, come from the land of big-ass SUVs, and I'm pleased with this. We have a legislature which meets only once every couple of years. It's going to be in session for about another 3 weeks, and I'm wondering if you can delay the announcement, and should they win something from this, because I'm sure that once some of them find out, they'll be very interested in finding out who perpetrated this mischief on the good people of the state of Texas.
Texas is in this collaboration.
I know.
Yeah. I think everyone supports it in Texas. Most.
Last question, Carl?
Have the manufacturers now acceded to the de facto national standard, or are they still saying for 2005, 2006 that they might?
They were fighting the consent decrees until very recently, like within the last 6 months, but I think that's finally been put to rest. We hope.
Susan?
I'm actually very happy with the result, and I want you to know that before I ask this question. Most air pollution control districts, I believe, are appointed, correct? The ones that are part of this consortium?
The officials who head them, you mean?
The boards.
It's a mix, actually.
It is a mix. It used to be not too long ago that almost every air pollution control director was a civil servant, was protected. More recently, they've become appointees by either governor or the mayor.
Right.
But I'd say it's a mix, maybe half.
But the boards like you have in California is not as common in the rest of the country.
Okay.
I report up through a commissioner who reports to the governor. I don't have a board overseeing regulations like they do
All
in
right.
California.
Then I may modify my question somewhat, but it's just so I understand, because I'm a strategist now, not a politician. You filled, as Carl was saying, a gap in the law and decided to do it because your estimation was we needed the air cleaned up. And you were successful in doing that. To replicate this, you could take a piece of federal legislation that an organization agreed with, or in that fact, or let's say you disagreed with it, but more to your point, you agreed with it but thought it ought to be implemented faster. And therefore, you essentially step in where the representative government, for whatever reason, chose not to have it implemented as quickly and decided that we're going to force an implementation more quickly. Is that an accurate?
Well, there are a number of states where, and Massachusetts is one of them.
And we started the day with a very strong program with First Gov. We've ended the day on a very strong note. Bill Becker